on social media and different things. And so our first question is, as a registered dietitian, what does a healthy relationship with food look like? And how have you seen that become compromised in this time of social distancing?
Yeah, good question. So kind of to speak to the first half of that question, what a healthy relationship with food looks like. I kind of prefer to think of it as, what can a peaceful relationship with food look like? Healthy can have a lot of different connotations and can mean different things for different people. But peaceful is really something to strive for. So like, how can there be peace within my relationship with food, and how can I strengthen that? So for the first thing, I guess, is being able to eat all foods. So a balance in the things that you're eating. I know right now there's a lot of different limitations within grocery stores and you're being limited in what you can purchase, but being able to at least mentally and emotionally allow yourself access to a lot of different things, just to have balance in what you're eating, is always a good start. So no limitations, no good foods, no bad foods, and just really unconditional permission to have different things. Another thing is making sure that you are food secure. So in these times that we're kind of in right now, this is just a really weird, unprecedented time. And you need to make sure that you have food security and that you have access to safe, quality, appropriate food. If you don't, there are different programs in place to be able to help you have access to that, because we want to make sure that, a huge component in being able to have a healthy relationship with food is having access to it,
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important. The other thing is, when I also think of a healthy relationship with food, a strong relationship with food, again, going back to peaceful, that word peaceful, I like to reference Ellen Satter's normal eating definition. So if you have never read that, I would highly recommend that you go Google Ellen Satter and her normal eating definition. And it's a long definition of some different things that really just promotes flexibility within eating patterns and again, having access to a lot of different things. And so there's one part of the definition where she says that normal eating takes up some of your time and space, and some of your time and attention, but it keeps its place as only one part of your brain space, essentially, or only one important area of your life. And that's really important because, for people who have struggled with eating disorders or a restrictive mindset, freeing up a lot of brain space to think about something other than food and movement is huge. You realize that you have all this time to think about different things that are not food related or not movement related. So another thing too, as far as, again, just being able to have a healthy relationship with food, or describing a healthy relationship with food, I always promote the book Intuitive Eating. I always plug that book. It's written by Evelyn Tribole, and the co-author is Elise Reich. I hope I'm saying her last name right, but it is, made up of 10 basic principles, and the third principle is make peace with food. And so it walks you through the different steps of how to break down barriers, or of categorizing different foods, how to kind of get rid of those black and white labels, good, bad foods, and really kind of see all foods as neutral. Because we know what happens, and what research suggests is that if we keep something from ourselves, we're going to want it more, because it's going to bring in feelings of deprivation, which is going to lead to uncontrollable cravings. And so it's kind of that paradox principle of, I can't have this, well, I want it more. That's a human drive to, if I restrict myself from something, I'm going to want it a lot more because I can't have it. And so just kind of picturing that restrict, binge, guilt cycle. If I don't allow myself to have something, I want it more. So making sure that you've got access to a lot of different things, whether physically, emotionally, that you are allowing yourself permission to have a variety of foods during this time. And, the other thing that I would say is, we should, within our relationship with food, we should be able to, and hopefully are able to, choose foods based on flavor, texture, and preference versus what we feel like we should or shouldn't have. When we were kids, when we were toddlers, prior to diet culture entering the picture, we were able to choose things based off of what we wanted and what we knew that we liked. And so it should be able to be that simple. For a lot of people, it's not. And that's totally valid, but that's the place that we at least want to get to. And as far as how it's been compromised, this is such a huge thing right now because, everyone has a little bit more time off. So a lot of people are home right now, maybe indefinitely, they're isolated. And For people who have had eating disorders, they may be in a place where they are isolated. They're not near their support system. They're not near their clinical team. And this just leaves a lot of time for their thoughts to wander. And that's not always a good thing. Your thoughts can wander to, I need to move more. My gym is closed, so I need to move a little bit more to earn or burn what I had or what I'm planning on having. And so it's important to kind of get back to, what do I want my relationship with food to be like? How can I foster a healthy relationship with food if that's not, a situation that I'm in right now, or if my relationship with food doesn't look like that right now? And again, these are times that are unprecedented, they're unpredictable. And so our eating patterns and behaviors right now may not look like what they looked like pre-pandemic, and that's okay. But, even without this pandemic, there are so many factors that can affect our relationship with food. Diet culture, obviously, being a huge one. Body shame, just different diets popping up, all these different things. They just released the Dirty Dozen for the year. They release that every year, and that just got released. And so all these different things that can affect our relationship with food and our mindset around food without the pandemic even happening. So that just adds a whole nother layer to, how our relationships with food are even being compromised right now. So, but again, it's being compromised in a lot of different ways. We're not near our support systems. A lot of us may not be. For people who maybe don't even have, diagnosed eating disorders, and maybe are not even aware that they struggle with disordered eating. I've seen a lot of those, like the memes and the gifs pop up of that are really body shaming, and it'll be a picture of a person in a larger body size, and it'll say, this is what I'm going to look like post-pandemic. A lot of people are talking about the COVID-19 or the, COVID-15 or whatever they're saying. And it's really sad, because there are so many things going on right now in our world that are things that we really need to think about and pay attention to, and really serious matters. And it's sad that also has to be something that's also impacting our mental state, our mental health. To think about, I'm so scared of being in a larger body size. And that's it's a fear that a lot of people have. And while it's valid, it's something that doesn't have to be feared, or shouldn't have to be feared during this time. And so it's being compromised in a lot of different ways. And, another thing is going back to the food security piece. Again, with, grocery stores are open, things are available. Maybe not everything that you want to be available is available, and there's, got to be a little bit of flexibility within that, but they're placing limitations on what people are purchasing. And they're doing that because when, again, going back to the deprivation mindset, if you feel like things aren't going to be available, you're going to almost hoard or binge those things. And so, they're putting limitations on, you can buy 2 jars of peanut butter or 2 loaves of bread. And they're doing that because people are going in and buying and hoarding all these things out of fear that it's not going to be there. And so it's the same thing whenever we think about a disordered relationship with food. I'm afraid it's not going to be there, so I'm going to binge on it now. And then, of course, again, that leads to different negative feelings, and we get back in that cycle that's really hard to get out of. But yeah, so.
Yeah, I found it pretty just, fascinating and a little bit saddening that when, like you said, there are so many things that could be compromised in this really time of uncertainty, that the idea of body image and diet culture still has such a stronghold, and it's taken up so much of our time and attention. And so we did have a question from one of our participants asking, why am I so drawn to comfort foods? Things like Oreos and milk, sweet and salty, just going back and forth between those right now and in general.
Yeah, good question. And I'm going to speak to the a lot of people have said that they're finding themselves more like boredom snacking, and I'm going to speak to that in a second too. But I think more people are drawn to comfort foods right now for the simple fact that if you think about relationships, they're not with their people who make them comfortable. Whether that's your treatment team, whether that is your family or friends and you're not living with them, we are drawn to find comfort in some way. And if we don't have it through our relationships, we're going to yearn for it in some other area. And so it may just be that you are finding that through food right now.
Yeah, so really when we're craving, and it becomes a survival technique. And
Right.
that's really a huge part of eating disorders is using it as a survival tool. And for some, it's very resourceful, depending on their circumstances. And so I wonder if, before we go into our next question, if we could maybe just do a quick activity. We thought it would be fun for everybody to either write down or maybe type on your phone, either a hashtag or an emoji that describes your relationship with food right now. And Leigh-Ann can kind of elaborate on the intention of that. So
Yeah.
hashtag or an emoji that describes your relationship with food.
Yes. So for everybody who has their video frame on, or they're sharing their video, if you want to type into the notes app kind of how you would describe your current relationship with food through a hashtag or an emoji, like Kayla said, and kind of hold that up to the screen. We're going to do a fun little activity. The point is, there's a lot of different emojis that can describe things in a lot of different ways. But, if you would currently describe your relationship with food as like the confused emoji, or, a fun food, or whatever it might be, and where you want to be is a little bit more peaceful, or a little bit more variety, or, whatever that might look like. The point is, how can we take steps to get from point A to point B? So how can we take steps to get from what my relationship with food currently looks like to where we want it to be?
So let's see, and we've got some hashtags coming through, so feel free to share those, everybody. I think if I were to hashtag mine, most of you know that I'm also a registered dietitian, and so I would say mine right now would probably be hashtag finally free, which is a pretty cool, and it's taken a really long time, but hashtag boring, I miss Chick-fil-A, mindfully aware, hashtag boring week, but foodie on the weekend. These are great. So keep them coming. Also, keep up those questions, everybody. And so going to the, people have been expressing concern about snacking all day, and we've touched on this idea that food does provide us with some comfort. What are some things that you suggest to our clients who might be struggling with eating disorders, and just people at large, and things that they can do, or ways that they can even offer grace for themselves when they're expressing or feeling these fears?
Yeah, definitely. So again, we're living in times that are kind of weird and unpredictable right now. The circumstances right now, we kind of don't know what day-to-day things are going to look like. So again, it's okay if our eating patterns and behaviors right now don't look like they did pre-pandemic, because they're probably not going to. Again, what we have physical access to right now in the grocery stores is a little bit different. We don't have as wide of a variety as we may be used to. So the first thing is remembering that food isn't the enemy. It never was. But a lot of our fears may be manifesting as, I need the food, or I need to binge on this, or, this is my comfort right now. And that's okay, and that's totally valid. But just remember that food never was the enemy in the first place, and it's not something that's working against you. Going back to the restrict, binge, and guilt cycle, the more that we deny ourselves access to something, the more that we're going to crave and desire it always. That is just kind of how biologically our brains work. If we tell ourselves we can't have sweets, we are going to want sweets. But I think a lot of people, this has been a really common theme in a lot of things I've seen on social media recently, that people feel like they're going to eat all the snacks in their pantry, or all their quarantine snacks, or whatever it may be. But I think that people are feeling the need to snack for two basic reasons. Number one, they feel like they shouldn't be snacking, or they shouldn't be having whatever it is that they're having. And that is going to lead to a drive, of course, to eat. Or number two, they're genuinely just bored, or experiencing a wide variety of emotions that's been driving them to eat. So first, in healing that maybe feeling of overdrive to eat certain things, it's important that they're allowing themselves to eat, and they're not being restricted in any way. Again, this may be really difficult if someone currently has a restrictive or a dieting mindset. But again, I really like the phrase unconditional permission. That's how the intuitive eating book phrases it. And it's, there are no conditions on what you can have. There are no good foods, there are no bad foods. And when you have that, when you're in that place of unconditional permission, you have given yourself access to everything, and that really reduces the drive to eat certain things. So anytime that you give yourself permission to have those quote unquote bad foods, or whatever the foods that you feel like kind of have power over you a little bit, anytime that you give yourself ongoing access to have those things, it's always going to reduce the power that they may feel like they have over you in the long run. And so being able to practice that is really good. And again, that comes out of, it teaches you how to do that in principles 3 and 4 in the intuitive eating book and workbook. So if you want more information on that, or if you want to really learn how to do that for yourself, that's a really great reference and a really good thing to go to read over. And I think it's just important too to remember, this pandemic it feels like it has gone on forever, but it's not going to last forever. This too shall pass. And so it's important to take a step back and, kind of like we just did, evaluate your relationship with food and think about, what are some things that I want to create within my relationship with food to foster a healthier relationship with food, or a more peaceful relationship with food right now? So creating routines and rhythms within your eating routine. So that may look like, okay, I'm going to eat very consistently today. I'm going to make sure that I'm having enough at each meal and snack. Because if you are feeling the need to eat all the snacks, it may be that you're genuinely just hungry. Your body may not be physically satisfied, because hunger comes in forms of emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. And so you may just need a snack, and that's okay. And there shouldn't be any judgment around that. And so if our bodies are genuinely satisfied and we finish that snack or that meal and we walk away, and we start doing another activity, we're not going to still be drawn to it again. And that is in a mindset of having permission to have all things. So it's important to make sure that we're having enough. So that's the first thing. But to speak to the, boredom snacking, or maybe the emotional eating, it's important here to point out that boredom snacking and emotional eating can be two very different things. They can be similar, but to speak to the emotional eating part, our culture as a whole would describe emotional eating as a really bad thing, but it doesn't have to be. You can make a conscious choice to eat ice cream because you're happy, or eat pizza because you're sad. So emotional eating does not have to be a bad thing. It's just important that I think where it can get really maybe messy is if you're only using food to cope. So if you're using food as your coping skill right now, and that's the only tool that you're using, then it's not going to be a healthy coping skill. And so it's good to kind of take a step back, reevaluate what your coping skills are, what are some other coping skills that I can use during this time, and also to be a little bit more mindful around your eating experience. So eating at a table, eating your meals and snacks at a table, eating without electronic devices around, making sure you're putting your food or your snack on a plate, and actually, having a little bit more of a mindful experience around the eating, and not just kind of eating out of containers and feeling very out of control with your eating. So just adding a little bit of mindfulness to that. But again, I want to reiterate that emotional eating, because we are all experiencing a wide range of emotions right now during this time, emotional eating does not have to be a bad thing. It can very much be a healthy and normal part of eating. It's just how we're approaching it. And again, if food is our only coping skill right now, it's not going to be necessarily a healthy one. Another resource that I'll give on that is the other day, Evelyn Tribole, and again, she's the author of the book Intuitive Eating. She posted on Instagram the other day a post on how to reject diet culture within quarantine. And it was a really, really good post. And I think it would be helpful for a lot of people. So if you want more information or more of a resource around this question too, and how to not boredom snack, or, how to kind of get away from that feeling if that is what you're feeling right now, that would be a really good resource to look at as well.
Awesome. Do you have any apps that you recommend to help with emotional or boredom eating? Are there any things that we use with our clients or recommend at discharge that can help just structure mealtime or ensure that they're getting adequacy in their meals and snacks?
You broke up when you asked the first part of the question. What did you say?
Someone is asking if you recommend any apps to help with emotional
Okay.
or boredom eating. And then I hopefully you heard the rest of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did. I guess I know that there are a lot of mindful meditation apps. Those are the first ones that I would recommend. There's also an app called, I think it's called the Recovery Journal. Don't quote me on that, but it's a thing where you can communicate with your treatment team, and you can kind of log what you're having, log how you're feeling, and it kind of brings in, this is what I'm actually having. It's almost like we have food and feelings logs here at Magnolia Creek, and it's a place where the clients can write, if they find the tool useful, they can write what they're having and how they felt physically versus emotionally before and after the meal or snack. And so there's an app that kind of has put that into an app, but I can't remember the exact name of it, but I can get you that resource. It's called Recovery something, but I can't think of it exactly right now.
I think Recovery Record, it's
yes,
it's an awesome tool. A lot of outpatient dietitians use that as a tool as well. And, I love the idea of permission that intuitive eating promotes. And it sounds like that's what I'm hearing a lot from you is allowing this idea of permission. And, it's something to think about if you are feeling pretty broken in your relationship with food. A registered dietitian can help you really seek that permission and peace, paired with a therapist as well. And so those are all of the things that a proper care team is part of. And so our last question is looking at our last structured question is, food is not just nutrition. It can be and mean a lot of other things. And so while some of us may have a lot more time on our hands, what are some ways we can explore nutrition? So what are ways that we can make it fun? Ways that we can maybe incorporate new foods or try new things?
Mm-hmm. So like I was saying earlier, if you are someone, or from a client perspective, who has had a history of disordered eating, it can feel very freeing to get to this place of not having food kind of take over every thought and every conversation that you have. Again, it can feel like you have a whole nother, a whole new brain space to think about all these different things. But anyway, this is a really fantastic time. If you do have a lot of time at home to kind of explore some new ways to do some exploring with foods and nutrition. And so one of those is, I have a lot of different things I'm doing right now, but baking bread is one of them. If you have never baked bread by hand, it is a lengthy process, and it's kind of a labor of love. And so it can take a couple of weeks. So actually, just this week at Magnolia Creek, I had a client who carbs are a really big fear food. Gluten, bread, all of that's kind of a big fear food for her. And so we did, via kind of exposure therapy, we did a sourdough bread baking experiment. And so she started a couple of weeks ago, and she started her sourdough starter, and she's been getting that going for a couple of weeks. And then she finally baked the bread this week. And so it's been like this really lengthy process, but this week she was actually able to make it, and it turned out so well. And it was something that all the clients kind of like were really excited about and proud of her for. So that was really cool. So if you have never baked bread, that's a really good one. Maybe starting an herb garden or a garden in general. I think that that can be something really fun, and just kind of a trick of the trade. If you plant tomatoes, make sure you plant marigold flowers around them so the animals and pests don't get to them. That's really important. We've kind of had, I was saying earlier, we've kind of had a cold snap in Alabama this week. So kind of weird for this time of year, but if you are not in a place where it's super cold right now, then this is like the prime time to be planting things. So an herb garden, a garden, those are great things to do. Another one would be trying new recipes. So again, I know we're kind of living in the days of media and social media, and everything is online. But and a lot of us probably use blogs and Pinterest for our recipes. I know I do, and I love to do that. But using a cookbook, dusting off some of your old cookbooks and actually making recipes out of those is always a really good idea. I just finished cooking my way through the Magnolia Table Volume 1 cookbook, and that was really fun. And I'm about to start baking through the Volume 2. So that's a good cookbook if anybody wants a recommendation. But, you know, just kind of getting yourself back into a good pattern of eating consistently, cooking consistently for yourself can be really great. Another thing is being able to, I know with everything, you know, during social distancing, you may not be around the people who you consider to be super supportive of you, but being able to even share meals and snacks through FaceTime or through Skype, that way you can still see your people, you can see your support system, y'all can share a meal together, even if it is virtually, is really cool. So, and a couple more that I thought of, if you have, you know, more time to read right now and you like to read, the intuitive eating book is a great one. Working through the workbook is really good. Again, that's a good way to foster and grow a healthy relationship with food. And the last one is, you know, we're living in a culture that is like, do more, always do more, 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 more. We're so busy all the time. And so it's okay to rest. It is okay to take time for yourself, to do that self-care, whatever that may look like for you. And just to kind of figure out a way, how can I rest today? How can I take care of myself today? And that's kind of how I would end that question for everybody listening. What is one way that you can provide self-care for yourself today? What is one way that you can rest today? You know, we should be able to rest and not feel like we have to do all these different things that we have on our to-do list today. It's totally okay to rest and take care of ourselves without feeling guilty about that.
Yeah, I think rest can be just as productive as work, and so we don't always look at rest as productivity, but it definitely falls into that. And so we have some more questions. One of our participants is wondering if the intuitive eating book and tips also help guide clients to process their connection between eating behaviors, their relationships, maybe connections with other non-related coping behaviors. Is that all part of that workbook?
Yes. And the intuitive eating book is great, but what really brings it to life is doing the workbook. So when I have clients as assignments, sometimes I'll give them the intuitive eating book and I'll tell them, you know, go through this principle because this is based on what we're working on this week. But I always tell them, read the chapter in the book and then do the chapter that corresponds with that in the workbook, because it really actively takes you through different steps that you need to take to make different connections, whether that's, you know, physically, this is how I'm feeling, but emotionally, this is how I'm feeling. And, you know, I was really emotionally full for this meal, but physically, I actually knew that I needed to eat. It just helps them to identify those different connections. So yeah, definitely. It's a great workbook. It's a great resource.
Yeah, maybe this does offer such a great new amount of time for people to take their time and attention on their relationship with food through those resources. And so another question, some of the members are asking if you have any tips for supporting clients around mealtime during virtual sessions or telehealth support, mealtime support groups. I've seen a lot of meal support therapy through telehealth recently. And so what are some tips that you have, ways that people can support their clients?
Yeah. So there has been a lot of different, on Instagram specifically, there have been a lot of different people posting. And there was, I wish I could remember the name of it right now. And Kayla, I can send you this for you to be able to send it out. But it's
the COVID-19
support group. I think it's called COVID-19 Meal Support on Instagram. And they have daily meal support, I think at maybe breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But basically, through the Instagram stories, not through the actual post, but through the Instagram stories, they're going live at certain meal times throughout the day and offering that for people. So, so the times may be a little bit different based on where you are, but still, that's a great resource because it is live. I think it stays live for about 24 hours. So you could go back to that. And so when someone's having their meal, they could go back and do that while they're, you know, actually having their meal. So that's a really great resource. There's also just a whole host of people on social media. And I'm thinking Instagram specifically, just because you can do the stories and you can look at the posts and all that. that are offering meal support. There are a lot of clinicians. I know Rachel Jones out of Georgia, Emily Murray out of Nashville. They have posted some virtual meal support things recently. So lots of different resources there.
And I believe that is called COVID-19 eating support. And
Yes.
there are professionals who is leading that live feed pretty much 24 hours a day, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
We have another question that came through. Many gyms and health centers are encouraging juice cleanses and intermittent fasting as a tool to supplement less activity during this time. What tips do you have to navigate this? And I think we could spend hours on this. So as best you can do, Leigh-Ann.
So my first tip is filter your feed. So go through your social media and delete anyone, unfollow anyone who is not helping you to cultivate a healthy and strong relationship with food. So anybody who is suggesting that you should do a cleanse right now, because here's the thing, your body is still needing energy regardless of whether the gym has closed. It's still living and breathing and surviving and trying to protect you, and it still needs energy regardless of whether you're able to physically go to the gym or not. So anybody that is suggesting that, at least for this period of quarantine and social distancing, I would encourage you to unfollow them and to really filter what you're able to see on your social media. Something that I did years ago was, when Instagram first started, is I made sure to follow people who are promoting kind of my similar thought process around maintaining a healthy relationship with food. And so I really only follow people who promote intuitive eating and health at every size and body acceptance and making peace with food and things like that. And so because of that, because I've filtered my feed in that way, that's all that I see when I get on social media. And so it creates a space for social media to be something so much more positive than what it can be if you're kind of letting whoever and whatever on your feed. So
I love that. That's almost a hashtag all in itself. Filter your feed. And yeah, asking, I guess, if you feel kind of bad about yourself when someone posts things and filtering that out. So another participant would like to know, what is a good intro book or app for teens? Ways that they can, create a healthy relationship with food at a younger age, that aren't maybe necessarily labeled as eating disorder, but just how to allow teens to start to explore a healthier relationship with food.
Yeah. Well, I think that, it's not necessarily an app, but there are a lot of different podcasts that you can listen to. So, books on, if you look on Audible, there's, intuitive eating on Audible, or, whatever it might be. Body Respect is a really good one. Health at Every Size is a really good one, although that one is a little more sciencey. But there are different blogs that you can read. There are different podcasts that you can listen to. There's different resources electronically that you can look at, but then also just going back to the different social media apps, there are a lot of support people on there. And so just different things like that is probably what I would suggest as far as apps go.
And what about, as people who are in guidance for those teens, things that they can do, language that they can use around their own bodies, and would that be helpful for teens to hear, and would that be helpful for them to just start paying attention to, is how, how often do I talk negatively about my body around my teenager?
Exactly. And something that I tell our clients a lot, and something that they hear from me a lot, is what you pour into yourself is what is going to come out. And so if you're constantly pouring, negative thoughts into yourself and body shaming yourself and just shaming yourself in general, that is what your actions are going to speak to. But if you are pouring into yourself positive affirmations and things, speaking life into yourself, that's what's going to come out. And so it's really important, how do here are my negative thoughts. How do I reframe those? And how can I practice this? How can I practice what I'm reframing those into?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I did see a question about workshops in Central Alabama for eating disorders, and it looks like that was answered. There is a Birmingham IADEP chapter, and they do
Mhm.
offer CE events. The next one is in October, hopefully. Might be virtual, hopefully not October. Woo! Um, and so, if I believe that concludes the questions for today, and we just want to thank Leigh-Ann again for sharing your expertise. And please don't hesitate to reach out if anyone else has any other questions. Also, if you scroll through your chat, people were adding plenty of resources for really great cookbooks and the intuitive eating book as well. And so do save that chat if you'd like, and we're recording this also that we can send out. Ethan, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Sure. I'll just say thank you to you both. Really great presentation. I know that I pulled stuff for myself even out of this. So Leigh-Ann, Kayla, thank you, thank you, thank you, Nick. And we will see you all next week. We'll continue next week on Tuesday and Thursday. And then on Tuesday at noon, we have our very own Clay Weaver and Dr. Daniel Bober of Life Skills in South Florida. And they will be giving us a really informative presentation on COVID's impact on long-term mental health. That, of course, includes eating disorders and all other related mental health issues. So please join us next week. You all will receive an email invite again with all of the information, but we do look forward to seeing you then. Thank you all.
Thank you.